Welcome to Quantum Photonics. We are trying to address the question and listen to a resource speaker. It says, can someone born blind instantly recognize objects by sight after gaining vision? This was a centuries old philosophical question initially posed by William Molyneux in 1688. Researchers utilized newly hatched chicks which possessed well-developed sensory system right from birth to explore this intriguing question, and by raising chicks in complete darkness and introducing them to either a smooth or bumpy object for tactile exploration during the first 24 hours of their lives, they created a unique experimental setup. And their study not only provides a compelling answer to Molyneux's question, but also opens new avenues for research into the neural mechanisms underlying multisensory integration. This could lead to deeper insights into how our senses interact and develop, potentially informing the therapeutic strategies for sensory impairments. So, our guest speaker here, Dr. Elisabetta Versace, is a Royal Society Leverhulme Trust Senior Research Fellow, and she is an Associate Professor at the Queen Mary University of London, where she focuses on the study of animal minds. She is a comparative psychologist and a behavioral neuroscientist who studies the skills of a range of different species, from domestic chicks to tortoises and bumblebees. She will talk today about her current research focused on the understanding how the physics of the environment has shaped the cognitive abilities and behavior of animal minds, giving some insight starting from the mind of domestic chicks. So, without further ado, I bring you here our guest speaker, Dr. Elisabetta Versace. Elisabetta, welcome to Quantum
Thank
Photonics.
you. Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. Very exciting to be here and to manage the technical things to then be able to deliver something about my research. The topic is a bit broad, so hopefully will catch the interest of some of you. Because we ask where ideas come from. If you have a chance to have a look at the PDF with the slides, we're now in slide 1, and where we ask where ideas come from. And I say that basically we want to look at the foundation of cognition. And what is maybe relevant for this quantum physics is that we go from physics to the minds. So why this question so broad? Where do ideas come from? Yeah, you can ask yourself and think about what is your idea. Overall, we can summarize as if there are two main sources. We can have what we call sometimes instincts, but can also be called predispositions for people that is into statistics. This is also called priors, which means what we know before there is an experience. So there is some part of our ideas, of our knowledge, that doesn't depend on experience, is already there in a sense. And another potential source instead is learning, or in statistical terms, what we call posteriors, which is what we learn from our direct experience with environment, or also from the observation of what other agents, other entities do in the world. And of course, there is the interaction between these instincts, the predispositions, and learning. My task is to try and dissect these components and understand the origins of ideas. And when I say origins, this has a broad sense, because the origins are evolutionary. They derive from our past and what was successful in the past. But origins are also related to the beginning of life. And as you will see, the evolution and the development might be joined and we studied together using, now we are in slide 5, what we call precocial species. You see here that there is, or you can imagine that there are two, here you see there are two different types of hatchlings: chicks, domestic chicks, poultry chicks, and tortoise hatchlings. And they are both hatching or soon after hatching. There is still the shell around their body, but they are already able to move and to watch, because precocial means that these animals are already born mature from the point of view of the motor system. They can move around, they can search for food, but also from the point of view of their sensory systems and perceptual systems. They can explore and discover what is in the world. Differently from humans that are helpless for many months, we cannot move autonomously at the beginning of life, and also the senses are not developed. So it's very good to use precocial species because we can control them and control what experience they have. So the chicks in particular can be a very good model, we say. So a simplification that is very useful for disentangle what comes from the as an instinct and what is instead learned. Think about the eggs. They can be controlled in the incubator. We can give them light or darkness, and we can watch the embryo developing. We can give specific information also soon after hatching. So it's very good to use these models, these systems, to investigate the interface between what is learned and what is instead given before learning, because we can exclude specific information. So let's think about the information that is very reliable, and probably in this in quantum photonics, you might be already exposed to some knowledge about physics, about the fact that there has been something very constant in our the evolution of all living beings that we know, which is exposure to terrestrial gravity. Why? Because all animals have evolved in an environment in which they have been exposed to the acceleration of gravity, which is pretty constant, 9.81 meter per second square. And so this means that we can use this as something that is reliable, almost constant. So the question is, has gravity been embedded in our minds, in the toolkit that is cognitive? And why should this be the case? Because gravity is crucial to influence the behavior and the cognition of all animals. We should be able to predict the movement of inanimate objects, but also other living beings, other agents. How they move is influenced by gravity, our own movement, how we predict to reach object or to avoid the contact with other objects. However, there is a difference between the predictions that we can do for animate and for inanimate objects. So if some of you are watching at the slides, we are now at slide 9, but I can also describe this for you. There are two scenarios. One is a scenario in a forest where there is a squirrel, and this squirrel goes up and down from a tree. We immediately notice this type of movement that goes also against gravity. And there is another scenario, that of a tree that falls down. So we can immediately tell apart the difference between the motion of an agent, like the squirrel that is able to go against gravity, up and down, from the inanimate movement of a tree that falls down. And interestingly, with living beings, we know that also standing up quickly, like a hand that all of a sudden is triggered by a loud sound, is a signal that can signal to the chicks that something interesting is going on. So we have a question. The question is this: so if experience is required to know that this upward movement of the squirrel, of the upward movement of the hand that scans around, if this movement upward against gravity is associated with interesting facts and potentially with living beings, so if we need experience to know this, or if due to the constant exposure to the physics of our planet, we evolution has prepared our minds with these expectations, those predispositions, those priors we said before any visual experience takes place. So how can we disentangle between these two scenarios? Well, we learn by experience, or we are born prepared. We test the chicks. We said already that they are very good models because we can control the experience that they have. And we use a minimalist setup. If you are on the slide 12, you will see something very iconic, which is just a black slide, because this is how our experiments start. We hatch them in full darkness, they don't see anything. So you're actually not missing much if you don't have the slides, because there is full darkness. This is the beginning of our experiments. And then we bring the chicks out from the incubator, and they see the very first visual experience. They have two options. There is an arena, like a rectangle, like a corridor. And the chick is in the middle, and there are two options on the sides. One is a dot that is moving upward against gravity. On the other side, there is a dot that is a circle that is moving downward, following gravity. And so we tested many chicks for their preferences to understand whether they preferentially approach the upward versus downward moving stimulus. And this, as I said, was their very first visual experience. So, what do you think they would do? If they don't have any expectations, they should approach either the upward or the downward stimulus with the same probability. So 50% of the chicks should go to the upward and 50% to the downward. But if they have an expectation, if they, before any visual experience, they find that the upward movement is more interesting, then the majority of chicks should approach the upward movement. And this is what we observe. I think Cecilia has shared a video with you where you will also be able to see the performance of the chicks in a couple of experiments. Basically, we tested if they have a preference for upward and downward movement when this movement is continuous with no changing acceleration. And the chicks have a preference for the upward movement. So there is a dashed line that is the 50%, and the chicks are above this line. We also checked whether the chicks have a preference for upward versus downward when there is acceleration consistent with gravity. And we found that, again, the chicks prefer the upward movement. And when we compare the preference for two upward movements, one that is constant and the other acceleration, there is no preference. So both movements upward are equally attractive. But when we look at how quickly the chicks move, we notice that they move faster towards the linear, the constant movement without acceleration. So it seems they are able to discriminate between these subtle differences. It remains to clarify something. Maybe some of you have already identified another question. So, were the chicks attracted by the upward movement, or were they scared by the downward movement? So to address this question, we ran another experiment comparing the preference for the downward movement versus nothing. And the chicks were not scared by the downward movement because they really approached it when there was no other option. So we can conclude that the experience is not required for the chicks to know that the upward movement against gravity, the movement that is associated with living beings, is more interesting because they had this preference at the beginning of life before they had any other experience. So I think we can conclude that evolution has prepared the mind of animals with some expectations, what we call priors, what we call predispositions, to identify some cues that are more interesting than others. And our hypothesis is that they find more interesting the stimuli when there is something associated with the presence of living beings. We have many studies on this topic if you want to check our publications. But overall, we notice that they have a preference for these simple, low level features that are associated with living beings. And in this case, we found something that is associated with physics, with the fact that the moving upward against gravity is unlikely. So I don't know if there is a burning question on this or whether I can build from these predispositions to the next connected topic, which is the connection between predispositions and learning. Because you remember our big question is whether we can identify where ideas come from, and they can come from these predispositions, but maybe they can come also from learning. So is there a connection between predispositions and learning? And let me introduce you something that has to do with abstract concepts and generalization. So we can imagine, you can watch the slides, but I'm sure you have enough fantasy to think about these stimuli that I will mention. So think about a green circle and a green circle. This is one example that I give you. Then imagine another example, a blue triangle and a blue triangle. So keep in mind what I'm showing to you, because then there will be a question. And then I give you another example, which is a yellow L and another yellow L. Okay, so I said green circle, blue triangle, blue triangle, and then yellow L, yellow L. Now, I give you my question. Do you think that a stimulus consistent is more likely, consistent with what I showed you before, is more likely to be purple diamond, versus purple diamond or red art? I think it's very, very easy that you identify the repetitions of the two diamonds as more similar to the previous stimuli I mentioned, because there is the identity of the stimuli. Even if the shapes are different, even if the color is different, you have identified the relation between these stimuli. Well, for us, it's extremely easy, but it requires hundreds or thousands of trials to train animals like pigeons or monkeys to solve the task. And it also takes a long time to train also artificial intelligence on these relational concepts. So the question is whether at the beginning of life we are prepared to conceive this relationship. And so again, we ask chicks in a type of experiment that is called imprinting. Many of you might be familiar with imprinting, thinking about the ducklings that after having been exposed to a dog or to the ethologist Konrad Lorenz, then follow the dog or Konrad Lorenz that clearly are not their mom. Because just exposure to these moving objects is triggering stimulus that help them to learn the features of those objects and then to follow them because they develop an attachment. So we use a similar logic to imprint the chicks on artificial moms. It was not a dog, it was not Konrad Lorenz, but they are artificial figures that we present on computer monitors. So we presented the chicks with those, for instance, two green circles for a couple of days, and other chicks were presented with a green circle and a blue S, for instance. And these stimuli were moving on the monitor, and the chicks were also following them. This was the exposure phase. It lasted a couple of days. And then we tested the chicks for generalization. It's important because that we didn't give them any reward. We just observed what they preferred to approach. So after, for a couple of days, they were exposed to either two identical stimuli or two different stimuli. Then we tested for their preferences with, for instance, two pink fuchsia C or a C and a orange triangle. So the chicks had not been trained with any reinforcement; they had just been exposed. So the question is whether, without any training, they were prepared to learn and to extract the relation between the stimuli. And so they did. If you have the slides, we are at page 26, and you see that those that were exposed to the same stimuli were more likely to approach the new same stimuli compared to the chicks that were previously exposed to the different stimuli. So what we learn here is that the chicks are prepared for learning. So there is an instinct, a predisposition for extracting some regularities, also quite sophisticated, like the relationship between different stimuli. So now we are getting closer to the big topic of this talk, now that you are prepared for this, because we want to know if it is possible to be prepared for some learning and visual learning without visual experience. So is it possible for a brain, and we will take chicks as a model, to represent something, for instance, an imprinting object that is experienced visually? So is it possible to represent visually something that has not been experienced visually? And this is connected to a problem that, as Cecile mentioned, is about 300 years old. It's called the Molyneux problem. You have to think about William Molyneux, the Irish philosopher that wrote to John Locke, the empiricist philosopher that was very important and renowned in his times, with a question that was very salient for Molyneux. Soon after getting married, the wife of Molyneux became blind. So maybe there was some personal relevance for this question that I'm going to explain to you. So imagine that there is a person that is born blind, a person congenitally blind, and this person that has never seen anything before is trained to discriminate, to tell apart a cube from a sphere just by touching, because this person is blind, cannot see. And so just with the hands, exploring with the hands, can tell apart a square from a sphere, a cube from a sphere. Then imagine that all of a sudden the sight of this person is perfectly restored. And this person has in front different objects to see, but this object cannot be touched. One object is the sphere, one object is the cube. There can be also other objects. Do you think that this person, without any previous experience with vision, will be able to identify what before was touched and recognized as a sphere or as a cube? It's an interesting question because it can clarify the role of experience in shaping, in creating our inner world, our representations. So empiricists like Molyneux and Locke thought that this was not possible because you need some experience to match the visual and tactile stimulation. However, there are alternative possibilities. So, to test this empirically with humans, we encounter some difficulties. First, that even if we remove the cataracta of a person that is born blind, this takes some time before the visual system is completely restored. And then these people had a lot of opportunities to culturally learn the correspondences between stimuli. So in any case, even a failure can be due to a lack of properly functional visual system, and the success can be due to some external stimulation that have nothing to do with the senses, with the cross-modal connection between the sensory experience. So, to make a long story short, we decided that the chicks can be the perfect model to study this. So, you remember that we can keep them in the incubator in darkness, and so we hatch them in the incubators in darkness before they had any visual experience. And this is what happens in their normal life. Their visual system is precocial, it's already developed at birth, at hatching, and just a few hours in the darkness doesn't affect their visual system because it's already developed. So half of the chicks were exposed to smooth cubes, and half of the chicks, soon after hatching, were exposed to bumpy cubes. And we gave to the chicks the possibility for one day to be in touch with these stimuli. So the chicks that were hatched and exposed to the smooth stimuli, they stayed in their compartment for 24 hours, and the same for the chicks that in darkness again had been exposed to the bumpy cubes. We also checked with the infrared camera, and we saw that the chicks in fact moved, and that they spent about 60% of their time in touch with these objects. So they had some opportunities to learn. And from what we said before, you know that they become attached to the familiar objects. So can they become attached to these tactile familiar objects, the bumpy or the smooth? To check for this, we expose them for 24 hours, and then we test them for the visual recognition. So there is a video that Cecile has shared with you where you can check the performance of the chicks. And we did something similar to what we have observed in the previous experiment with the gravity. So the chicks stay in their rectangular arena, and they have two options to approach. They start in the center, and on one side they had the familiar stimulus, on the other side they had the unfamiliar stimulus, and we checked what they approached. We are at slide 32. So you see here that the chicks that before had been exposed to the smooth stimuli, they preferred to approach the smooth stimuli. Even if this time they could not touch the stimuli, they could just see. And during the exposure, instead, they could only touch the stimuli. Vice versa, the chicks that have been exposed from the tactile modality to the bumpy stimuli, when exposed to the visual test, they preferentially went to the bumpy stimuli. So this suggests that the chicks with previous visual experience, they choose the visual smooth stimuli more than the bumpy visual stimuli based on their previous tactile experience, because the only difference between the two groups was the tactile experience. So it seems that the tactile information is somehow available to inform visual choices, so that the sensory tactile experience informs visual choices. How? So this will be our next research question, because there are multiple ways in which this can happen. So, for instance, we can think about a transfer from tactile areas to visual areas. This is one option. Another option is that there are brain areas that are amodal, so without sensory modalities, or supramodal, that go above, beyond sensory modalities, and that the sensory experience provides some amodal or supramodal information that goes in those areas. Or it is also possible that there are some neural sensory, some neurons that in the tactile and visual areas that are embedded in the cross-modally across different modalities, as it seems to be the case also for phenomena like the synesthesia in humans, where for instance, some sounds evoke systematically in some people this sensation of specific colors. So we know that the chicks are able to solve Molyneux's problem, and now our next question will be to try and understand how. So we are almost wrapping up here, and I want to tell you something again about the connection between predispositions and learning. So it seems that the brain at different levels is prepared, is predisposed for learning, and that we are born with some predispositions that can orient learning. Exactly yesterday, if you have a chance to check on my Twitter account, that is Eli underscore Versace, or the Twitter account of my prepared lab laboratory at prepared lab, you will see that there is another paper where we discover that the predispositions, the preferences for colors, support the generalization, the learning across different colors. So not only for the gravity, not only for cross-modal, but also for general visual stimuli, it seems that the minds of baby animals are tuned with priors, with expectations that are important, not just in the moment, but important also for learning and generalization. For the chicks, this is important to make choices to recognize the mom from different points of view, for instance. But this is important in our life every time. We cannot have trial and errors, but we have to make our best guesses without any reinforcement. And as the founders of the modern artificial intelligence say, it will be very interesting to understand from animals how this learning and generalization can happen so quickly that we don't need to have those millions or billions of trials of experience, but instead be prepared already in the first hours after we are born or hatched. So that I would say that the predispositions, this innate knowledge, is very connected to learning because can support learning and generalization, influencing us in understanding what is important to learn, to reduce the trials and errors, and to take advantage of what is constant, regular in the world, like the physics constants that we find, for instance, in the movement upward or downward with gravity, but also regularities like the same versus different that we can find in the stimuli that we encounter.
Hello. In my research group, we investigate why we are well prepared for the challenges of life. Today, Laura would like to tell you more about why chicks have a spontaneous preference to approach stimuli that move upward against gravity from the beginning of life.
Hi, my name is Laura Freeland and I'm a research assistant working in the Prepared Minds Lab at Queen Mary University of London. Today, I'd like to tell you how we discovered that newborn animals are attracted to objects that move upwards and why this is so. As soon as we see an animal moving, our attention is all on it. Even infants and newborn animals with no previous experience whatsoever are spontaneously attracted by the movement of living organisms. But what are the features of movement that we find attractive and that orient our attention towards living beings? We hypothesized that the movement against gravity can be particularly good in attracting our attention. It is a simple, reliable cue as only living beings can consistently move upwards against gravity. So we investigated whether upwards movement is attractive already at birth. We tested the spontaneous preferences of newly hatched chicks. The chicks hatched in darkness. This way they had no previous visual experience that could have biased their choices. They were gently placed in the middle of an arena that had two monitors playing different videos, one where a small red dot moved upwards and another where it moved downwards. These videos were very similar to those that used to test expectations for gravity in humans. When given a choice between a circle moving upwards or downwards on computer screens, baby chicks spontaneously approached upwards moving stimuli. They did so regardless of if the stimuli were accelerating or moving at a constant speed. We have also established that the acceleration did not make the movement more attractive. In control experiments, we made sure that the chicks were not afraid of the downward moving stimulus. This could have happened, for example, if they were interpreting it as something falling on their heads. But no, if there wasn't an alternative offered, the chicks followed the downwards moving circles, so the upwards movement was indeed attractive. Before this experiment, it was thought that the configuration of multiple joints of a moving animal were the simplest representation that triggered the attention of living beings. We showed that a single moving dot is an attractive feature of living objects. The ability to move upwards against gravity is enough to capture the chick's attention. We are discovering that vertebrate animals are born with predisposed knowledge. This work is an important step to understand how sensitivity to simple, low-level features can help shaping our activities from early stages of life.
Hello, my name is Elisabetta Versace. Today I will tell you how baby chicks can recognize objects that they have previously touched using vision. Even if they have never experienced together tactile and visual stimuli. We say that they solve Molyneux' problem. This is a very old problem. More than 300 years ago, the Irish philosopher William Molyneux sent a letter to the empiricist John Locke, and he asked a question. If there is a person that is born blind, that learns to distinguish between a sphere and a cube using touch, and then we restore the vision to this person, will they be able to tell apart the sphere from the cube using just vision? This is a very difficult problem, but an important one, because it goes at the core of experience and cognition. Are the sensory modalities and perceptual experiences connected by design cross-modally, so between sensory modalities? Or do they bind via experience with the simultaneous stimulation from different sensory modalities such as vision and touch? There are other connected questions. For instance, is our knowledge of the external world directly connected to sensory experience? And what is the origin of our representations? To address this question, we asked domestic chicks because they are born with a mature motor and sensory system. In the first phase of the experiment, we hatched them in darkness. Half of the chicks were exposed to the smooth stimuli, and half of the chicks were exposed instead to bumpy stimuli. These were smooth cubes or bumpy cubes. And you see here that in darkness, the chicks spent about 10% of their time moving and more than 50% of their time in touch with these objects. So they could have an experience with either the smooth or the bumpy stimuli in darkness. In the second phase of the experiment, we presented chicks for the first time with visual stimuli. We prepared an arena with the smooth and the bumpy stimulus, and we put the chick in the middle of the arena, and this was the first time the chick had experience with visual stimuli. After a few seconds or minutes, the chicks made a choice. Overall, the chicks that were previously exposed to the smooth stimuli preferred to approach the smooth stimuli much more than the chicks previously exposed to the bumpy stimuli. We can conclude that chicks can use tactile experience to solve a visual recognition task, even if they had no previous visual experience. So, in a nutshell, newborn, inexperienced chicks use tactile information to solve a visual task, and we discover that at birth the nervous system is already prepared to connect tactile and visual representation. So after more than 300 years, we can conclude that chicks can solve Molyneux' problem. Let us know what you think about our discovery.
I hope that was interesting, and I'm here to hear your feedback and to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Elisabetta. It's very, very interesting. I think that, your study, just this study and the one that you mentioned also that just came out yesterday, could intersperse with other multidisciplinary studies because it has very, very great implications. Like, for instance, in artificial intelligence alone, the question is because everybody's talking as of this at this point about the race towards artificial general intelligence, and
Yeah.
the contents of your study now has a lot of implications as regards to the discussion of its structure and has also epistemological implications in terms of philosophy. At the same time, it has great implications for evolutionary computing, evolution itself, and also to solve the question of intelligence. So this is in fact very, very interesting. In fact, it made me think a lot about so many things that if you try to push this study further, it will contribute to many other disciplines that we have. So anyway, I have a lot to
Yeah.
say, but I'd like to tell the audience that we are opening the floor for anyone who would like to come up and ask questions here. Please raise your hand. We will bring you up the stage. So maybe Elisabetta, in the future, I can suggest some possible questions that might be used as a basis for a study, because
Yeah.
I also work a lot on artificial intelligence, and every day I read a lot of articles and post it. And of course, one of the biggest questions that we have is that, for example, a lot of people are saying we have reached AGI. And if you see and look
Mm.
at the study that you have, the big difference is that they don't have a precocial background. So that's why the big argument of people like Yan LeCun, who is the father, one of the fathers of deep learning, is that it will take so many years for us to even reach the kind of consciousness that the house cat has. That's the big difference. So AGI is still too far away. And with the prevalence of the generative models or the LLMs, a
Yeah.
lot of people are saying that we have reached this level. But I just heard, from you. And yeah, would you like to have any comments about this? And perhaps you could do a really, a serious study based on this. I would really cheer you and people who would go with you on this study.
Yeah, so it's a very hot topic because if you think about um, how much you put into AI, and that what is the ability of a 1 gram brain of a chick that can outperform AI at the beginning of life, I think this can really inspire us. So there are ongoing studies, and we are on this interested in this, and that have are very polarized on the whether we should try to build AI with as few constraints as possible, or whether instead we should give some of these priors. And as you can imagine, I think that the priors can really support the development of general intelligence. In another study, we, for instance, found that the chicks have preferences for red and blue colors that help them to learn. And what these prior correspond to is that red and blue are very rare colors. So because they are rare in the background, they are good predictors. So it would be not strategic for AI to ignore the statistical regularity of the world and to have to relearn that red and blue in many contexts are rare, whereas embedding this information as prior because it's informative on the world, I think could be strategic in speeding up the system. So yeah, along the lines that you mentioned, I think this can be impactful also for computational studies.
Yeah, thank you so much. If there is time, I have more to say. I'm so excited to look at your previous studies as well as and that which came out, because yeah, it encompasses a lot of disciplines, and I think it addresses a lot of other questions in other disciplines. So, but in the meantime, we have Ens and Kevin and Jacob, who just came up on stage. And in order of PTR, I'd like to give the mic to Ens. If you have a question, Ens, welcome.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Cecile, Bob, and especially Elisabetta for today's sharing. I came a bit late, but make sure I have saved the deck. And well, it's interesting. It is not about the size, and it is not about Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So, but what I learned is that there are preconditions, and it was interesting to see these southern colors, yeah, as you just alluded to, and also yeah, trying to put this into the context of AI. I just wanted to ask because I'm daddy of four kids, and I have a granddaughter. Are you aware of the fact that babies, even young born, yeah, freshly born babies, have the capacity of grabbing a rope, yeah, and holding themselves, yeah, whenever something is happening, maybe water under them. And is it, can I compare it a bit or put it into context, yeah, that there's
Yeah,
something that is being given, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
not only through just learning, but
yeah,
through a preconditioning. Is
yeah.
it a fair
So
question, Elizabeth?
it's a fair question, but there are a couple of interesting distinctions that we can make between a reflex that doesn't require central processing, that can be peripheral, like the reflex that you mentioned, that or in the first hours of life are used also to evaluate the degree of development of the nervous system, and something more central where the responses are blurred, or there can be a decision of what to approach. So I think the interesting thing for me is that on top of the reflexes and more stereotyped responses that in all individuals would signal the correct development, there can be more advanced and subtle responses that depend on the environment, on the situation. For instance, this fast learning, like imprinting, uh, can can bring the animals to follow objects that wouldn't be uh, considered deemed similar to their mother hen, right? Because they can follow a shape that is presented on a monitor, showing the plasticity and the flexibility. And the reflexes, as you mentioned, are very good because they signal the degree of development of something that is stable and constant, but are more stereotypes. So I think I like to see the difference between these different abilities, more and less flexible.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I got your point, but just to build on that, a reflex, yeah, a baby, really freshly born, yeah, wonderful, yeah, yeah, newborn baby, to bring the reflex through the arms into the hands and really grabbing a rope, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is a quite complex thing that is already, yeah, there, yeah,
Yeah.
somehow.
Yes,
Wonderful.
it's interesting also in other species like monkeys, already from soon after birth, they are able to grasp the mother and stay on her and be carried away. So it's really adaptive that they are able to have so much strength and to hold with these reflexes that are really adaptive for their stage of life. Yeah, it's really really remarkable.
Mr.
Thank,
Kevin.
thank you, Ems. Um, yeah, hi,
It,
Jacob.
Hi,
I'd like
Cecile.
to. Hi. Can I give the mic first to Kevin, and after Kevin, you? Kevin?
Sure. I was actually going to ask Kevin because my question is directly related to this point of conversation. But Kevin, it's up to you. Let us know.
Okay. Yeah, just yeah. Do you think cryptochrome 4, found in the eyes of birds, for magnetoreceptor, for navigation abilities, do you think that may affect their affect this study, since they even though it's, they think it's probably, site dependent, light dependent. Do you think that may matter? I mean, for young birds, I hear that even blind ones, they have some part of it, and when they migrate, they get more of it. But
Yeah.
so that's my question, I guess.
Thank you. It's an interesting question. So I must say that on domestic chicks, it's not clear if they have a magnetic sensation, but it is a potential concern. So it was very important for us to make sure that we counterbalance, we say, the right-left position of the stimuli across chicks and across trials, so that in 50% of the cases, the bumpy stimuli were on the right, in 50% they were on the left, and also that so to exclude that they were biased, basically. And the other thing that we took into account is that the bumps that we added on the cubes, that they were not just on one side. So that when we had the condition or the stimuli with the smooth cubes, we also hung the same number of bumps that were basically rounded screws on that side. So that there was the same amount of stimulus in terms of materials and visual stimulation on both sides. Because, as you said, this is a very important concern to exclude alternative explanations. And to do this, we make sure that the same amount of stimulation is presented on the right and on the left, because in this case, if the chicks follow one specific aspect, they should go 50-50 instead of discriminating. I don't know if it was a clear answer.
Oh yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And yeah, Jacob, I'll give the mic to you now.
Bonjour, friends. Yeah, sorry for wanting to jump in, but my question is also about um, a priori behavioral expression
Mhm.
sets. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have two puppies. One thing that I notice in babies and puppies. Now, Kevin, I love that you brought up magnetosensors, because I'm thinking about thermophilic entities, maybe um, chemophilic entities, some sort of solar um, sensor. You can see this in many, many species. Okay, from humans, I enjoy the sun. If it's too hot, I'll find shade, right? Just like
Yeah.
many large mammals. But even in worms, okay, it's like they will go toward the sun.
Yeah.
Now, if we think about um, living entities as energy packets with very specific apparati, it would make sense that I have two puppies. Their teeth are growing. Their hands are growing. Just like a baby, it's like a baby has feet, a baby has hands, a human baby. And so
Yeah.
the potential to kinetic energy output, it's going through its specific apparatus, and so it wants to utilize that the tool that it possesses, and so it will grab the rope. My dog will bite something. It finds something on the ground and it bites it, no matter what it is, because it's using its apparatus to learn the environment. And just like a worm will crawl toward sunlight because it has some sort of extremo um, like we see this across the spectrum of living creatures, and I find that fascinating. So if we look at it from an energy packet specific apparatus
Mhm.
standpoint, um, I think there's some very logical observations that we can make. And that's it. And also, thank you. Oh, here's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, buongiorno, mio caro professor. Thank you very much,
Grazie. Okay.
Elisabetta. Thank you very much for your lecture. And yeah, I hope to see and hear from you more. And Cecile, thank you very much. Cecile, By the way, where's Sierra? We both had our birthday recently. Anyway, back to
Yeah.
you. Back to you.
Also, belated happy birthday. Shara is taking a break now because she had a small accident before, so she's trying to recover.
Yeah, recently I remember Sierra's like, I wanted to create quantum photonics because of the passion of science and my grandma and blah blah blah. It's like this is such an excellent community. And Elizabetta, thank you so much for your lecture. I hope you found my insights insightful, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes, so thank you for your comments. It's very interesting because, as you say, or as your comments imply, another very constant part of physics of our planet is the light and also the circadian alternation of light and darkness. So it's very interesting that we have adapted, like poultry chicks, to diurnal life, the life in light. But there are other animals that instead have adapted to the opposite, actually. And for instance, cockroaches and to some extent also worms that you mentioned are less attracted by light. They are photophobic, so they have a phobia for light. They try to avoid light. But maybe you may want to check a book that I particularly liked. Your Brain is a Time Machine, where you will discover that even bacteria have adapted to avoid light and reproducing before there are UV rays to avoid the degradation of DNA. So in fact, we adapted to light in different ways to avoid or to be attracted to it, and maybe there is more to learn on this topic.
And just as a quick point, the cockroach point reminds me of flies. It's like flies have compound eyes, which are more sensitive to movement. And so it's not necessarily maybe as photosensitive, but what's the motor sensitive. And so I've noticed this with certain types of bugs as well, that if you approach them, if you get close to them, they have some sort of response. And this does
Yes.
indicate for some sort of, yeah,
Yeah.
if not intelligence, at least some sort of reflexive
Yeah.
intelligent process.
I would call that, yeah, definitely a type of intelligence, especially, with flies and with the looming stimuli. My colleagues in the Debivort lab at Harvard University have also shown that when there is a looming stimulus, flies typically avoid it. And in chicks, we ran a similar experiment with chicks that were at the beginning of life, and we observed that they have different fleeing responses depending on the type of movement that they see for the first time. So we kept the chicks without any experience of moving objects, and then we gave them two options: a looming object that was basically like a circle that was increasing in size on the retina. And in that case, with this fast movement, the chicks very quickly were fleeing away as if a raptor or another predator was getting closer to them. Whereas when we presented them with a stimulus that was slowly sweeping, in that case, the chicks had a different anti predator response. Instead of fleeing away, they were freezing. So they have a quick response of fleeing away when there is a fast approaching stimulus. But when there is like the sweeping movement of a far raptor, they freeze, and this would decrease their probability to being spotted, to being detected. So definitely these type of reactions are adaptive and support the survival of animals from the beginning of life without any learning.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Okay, Cecile and Elisabetta, last one for you. Imagine creating various geometric shapes in the forms of various entities, like a small predator versus a large predator. You can add, you can do sound variables, you can do size variables, you can do geometric variables, like if it's sharp, right? If it has a hunting type of face, right? Like a cat or a dog, or if it's circular, right? Like maybe a cow is less threatening than a panther, for example. Um, and then we can see the spectrum of response based on species as we present these variables. I think that's very fascinating. It just takes time and money, I guess.
Yeah. So something similar has been done. Not exactly how you say, but in a similar way. So, for instance, the if you expose the chicks, but also human babies, to a stimulus that has like two blobs on the top, symmetrical, and one at the bottom, like if this is like a upside down triangle. This looks like a face to us, and chicks, but I showed also tortoises, are attracted by these stimuli. Okay, the face-like patterns, they are attractive. However, if you add a sclera and a pupil, like what is present in predator, this stimulus becomes threatening. So this is very interesting along the line that you suggest. So more research is needed, but it suggests that you might be right in your expectations, at least.
Oh my gosh, an angular velocity, like for birds. Imagine approaching slowly from a vertical angle. Okay, Cecile, Elizabeth, back to you.
Thank you, Jacob. Yeah. So we have Alfonso here on stage. Alfonso, mic to you.
Yes. Hi, Cecile, Elisabetta.
Hello.
Buonasera. Hi, Bob.
Buonasera.
Good to see everyone. I have a bit of a, I don't know if how relevant, but I'm very interested in human and animal behavior. And you mentioned reflex. What would the relationship be between, in your research, I guess, between reflex, instinct, intuition, all these, basic parts of behavior, and are there any behaviors? Well, no, I'll leave it there.
So I think the I think this it depends on what is the question that you want to answer. In my research, I'm trying to understand the interface between what apparently is more hardwired and doesn't require experience with what instead requires learning, showing that what apparently might seem something that doesn't require experience, in fact, supports, is a building block of more sophisticated cognitive abilities, because when we are attracted to some stimuli that can be the face like patterns or some colors or some movement, for instance, against gravity, this help us to focus our attention on the most interesting aspects of reality from which we can also learn. Because if we stare at objects that are very boring, that don't move, we learn very little. But if we are attracted by stimuli that move and that are likely to be our mom or other living beings, we are more likely to learn more. And so the connection is between being prepared for learning. I think that is the important thing, that what seems to be hardwired can in fact be something that gives support to learning and flexibility.
And have you looked at what happens once you have this learned behavior if it becomes I mean from the moment you and I hope I'm using the right terminology,
Yeah,
uh, what you know what without learning, once it becomes intellectualized by the brain or somewhat
yeah,
programmed, then for efficiency's sake, we don't need to use that much energy, invest that much energy in interpreting, I guess. And I don't know if it's relevant to this conversation because I'm like I said, I'm
yeah.
interested in what it would be to have an instinct, a reflex, and then what would be a combination of the reflex and some learned behavior.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because what we are discovering is that it takes longer, but it's not impossible. It takes longer to learn something that is less expected, whereas it's faster to learn what we are, what we expect, what we are predisposed to. But still, there is some flexibility. But as you mentioned, there we are facilitated to learn some things compared to others. So it's in line with your expectations, basically, that the brain is flexible, but at the same time, some types of learning are easier.
And do you have any knowledge of such behaviors in humans, such predispositions?
So, for instance, if in human infants in the nursery, it has been shown that they have a predisposition to follow, to orient the gaze towards faces. And this is very useful, very adaptive for these for our babies because they can better interact with the caregivers. So even if the human babies cannot interact a lot because they cannot move independently, but still already in the first hours of life, they are tuned to this. And also they are tuned to pay attention to the biological motion, which is the type of motion that is elastic, semi-rigid, compared to the linear movement or rigid movement. And so these predispositions to type of movement, to configurations like the faces, are very helpful from the first hours of life in our species to grow a set of cognitive abilities more sophisticated, but starting from what we call these building blocks. And they are also in place for estimating numerosity, for instance, to discriminate between small and big numerosities already in the first days of life, basically.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'd also heard that, I don't know how factual this is, that if you put three lights kind of in the shape of two eyes and a mouth, then the fetus would follow it, but I'm not sure if that's accurate. But yeah,
I
thank
think,
you so much.
yeah, I think this has been debunked by subsequent studies that show that basically the initial study was not as precise. That basically it was an artifact, but at least from the babies after being born, I can say that this has been replicated multiple times, and that in the chicks has been replicated multiple times, and that recently we have a paper in which we show that also tortoises have this preference for the faces, showing that probably it's a very conserved preference for paying attention to this type of patterns. So for the fetuses, it's probably not so accurate, but it's widespread across the different vertebrate species.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alfonso. So, Elizabeth, I would like to ask if you have heard of the work of Michael Levine and Josh Bongard about the Cenobots.
Not in detail, so I'm not ready to answer.
I just want to say, as part of what they're doing with the Cenobots, because I think they are on part 4 of this. It's like a Sega about what they had been doing, starting from it being a very simple creature that they have. They got this from the stem cells of the frogs, and in fact, it has no neural connections yet
Yeah.
because they just got it there. And so when it started out as a simple organism, there was a program made by Josh Bongard trying to design an organism which could evolve. So it didn't have legs, so it could not have mobility. So it developed its own legs, something like that, just like it developed cilia-like parts so that it is able to walk. But in some repeated experiments of Michael Levine, based upon this, because basically there is no fertilization that took place here. They just got this from the biological tissues that they got from the frog stem cells skin. So there was a formation of the eye, I think, on part 2 of their experiment. And when they put it in the actuator, this creature developed eyes and mouth. And what they did at the time, in the actuator itself, they tried to um, Picasso the eyes and the mouth, and they tried to displace it from the usual eyes and mouth that we have of creatures. So they were surprised to find out that even if they displace the mouth and put it on a certain area of the cell, and also the eyes on different parts, later on they set back to what is originally what we know of where the eyes and the mouths are. So they were shocked. Why is this happening? Um, is there a certain program that tries to predispose this? Why is it that it goes back to what we are expecting? So I think this is a very great relationship to your study, because you are talking about what we have. These animals are predisposed to have something, but under it there is something which is more simple and also complicated, because there seems to be a program that is there. However, these creatures were not part of something that evolved. Even up to now, there is still a debate about classifying Cenobots as either a biological robot organism, or is it something else entirely. So I am very, very interested in relation to the study that you have, because it tries to touch a lot of points as regards to what you're saying on what we have in the evolutionary process. So I think maybe in the future you should do a study together with these other scientists.
Yes, so actually, it's on my. I've started to read about these studies, but I'm not prepared to answer now. So for the next time, we can have another further discussion, because I don't want to be less than precise. So I will skip this today, and we will discuss in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I don't expect you to reply to this at once, because, of course, even I who asked that question should also do a lot of reading as well. So, another thing that I would like to mention in your study is that, Paul Baccherita, who is known for sensory substitution. This is, I think, I'm talking more about the learnings that I got from your
Yeah,
lecture today,
yeah,
because you said earlier that, for instance, how certain kinds of senses that we have are related to each other. Like, for example, light, which goes to the eye, and how we are able to try to use the touch in order for us to be able to recognize object. And
yeah.
you mentioned that there were cases, of course, of how we try to also identify things in order to survive, as per case of evolution, that we use our other senses. And then I remember the study of Paul Baccherita earlier, which was talking about sensory substitution. And later on, they had this experiment wherein a person, when there is something that has been attached to his tongue, um, there were electrodes attached to his tongue. He is blind, but he was able to see through his tongue. So
Yeah.
maybe this is part of our coping mechanism in order to survive, just like how blind people are also able to see, and also in relation to synesthesia. So that's why I'm fascinated by the study that you have. So
Yeah, it yeah, it's very it's a very interesting topic actually, because we still don't know about the in full about the plasticity of the nervous system, and also about this cross modality. So to what extent the we are programmed to merge or to process together stimuli that come from different modalities, and also to readapt different parts of the brain depending on the stimulus that of the input. So there seems to be a lot of plasticity that we are still trying to understand.
yeah, thank you. One more thing that I would just like to mention,
Yeah,
what fascinated me is that it might also be your studies or future studies will also be some answers, not the full answer, but some answer to the question of what is intelligence. Because,
mm,
of course, in my community, I learned so much about the gifted people or neurodiverse people, but mostly about
yeah,
gifted people. So there has been a dispute, as you mentioned earlier, of course, which is not only for people with high IQ, but the question of nature versus nurture. So people will always ask,
yeah,
where do these people of very high intelligence get their natural talent of being highly intelligent? Is it born or is it made? And so, as regards to some creatures trying to already have certain skills, like even if they had no experience or 10,000 hours of such experience, they are already considered expert even at an earlier stage. For instance, I have a friend, and this is a real life case, and
okay.
she did not know that. We were watching a pool game, and suddenly she wanted to join the pool, the billiard. So she went there, and then she's already very good, even if she didn't exactly know the rules yet. But as regards skill, she's already very good, and she was even surprised. And later on, she joined the Olympic team. And there are people, because our advocacy is for gifted children, that there are people who are able to compose a musical at a very expert level, even if he doesn't know how to read notes yet, at just 6 or 7 years old. So this kind of prodigious work without much training, it's a big question mark on that. And of course, it will have many questions, including ethical questions as well. But yeah, I think your studies will also be a tool for us to be able to solve intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating line of research to understand also the connection between different parts of the brain, and whether some people is more cross-modal than other, like some people has synesthesia, whereas most of people don't. So definitely there is a neuroscientific line of investigation that is very exciting, and we are just at the beginning. So it seems that in for people with synesthesia, there are some neurons from different sensory modalities that are not pruned, that are not removed at the beginning of life as much as in other people. So they are left in different areas, and so this gives this synesthesia. Yeah, so definitely it will be interesting to explore the connection between sensory modalities and perception intelligence, as you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I hope that we can invite you again in the future. There's so much to talk about, and
Yeah.
but we have someone who just came in on stage, Ganjan, and I'd like to give him the opportunity to speak. Gunjan. Hi, Gunjan. Are you able to
No,
speak?
no, 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 no. I am good listener.
Yeah, I saw Ens open his mic.
Yeah, but I heard Gunjang. Yeah, if you want to talk first, yeah, because new speakers first.
No, no, I'm good listener. You will continue to talk. I'm a good listener.
Okay.
Uh, okay, so yeah, I'll
Cecile, let me thank you once more. I learned from you. I think it was at least 3/4, if not 4/4 away, that there was a researcher that you had invited to present within your room about the red teaming of large language models. And I wasn't aware of that before. And yeah, so without disclosing whom I'm working for, I have 26 LLMs for different purposes behind the very strong firewall. And what I wanted to bring up here is now we see there is first, you have the training amount and selection and yada yada, and then you have the red teaming. Why shouldn't it make sense to factor in what Elisabetta was telling us here, that you have somehow a preconditioned capability, capacity? Why shouldn't the AI developers for LLMs, why shouldn't they bring this into the precondition before training and not after training and then red teaming? I know that's a very theoretical, hypothetical question here, but I hope it makes sense. And Bob, I saw your thumbs up. Yeah, it was you guys. It was you, Cecile, and Bob having invited this researcher presenting this red teaming. Yeah, but this has been done after training. Why not preconditioning the system first and then getting it trained? I hope
So
my
yeah,
question makes sense.
I think, in a sense, the episodic memory in AI is one of the many attempts. But at the same time, yeah, if you, I think I would like to go in that direction, but some of the difficulties are related to the fact that many of these models are black boxes, except for architecture. So maybe some people is trying to work at different architectures to support this, but for specific priors, when you have something that you don't fully know, it's philosophically, theoretically different than what most people is doing. And so I think these Bayesian models might have a chance to add something into this debate. I don't know what other people think.
yeah, I think first we have to know what is being programmed with us. I think for human babies, for instance, because of course, when you go to deep learning, it's based upon the brain. And if we have this precocial species, just like what Elizabeth has mentioned, we have first to identify what is there among the precocial species that's already programmed. It's a big question mark because I think to extend the study of Elizabeth further, she has identified this, creature species as a precursor to her study. But what is in there among the precocial species? What kind of abilities, or what kind of program, what kind of information do they have for it to be used as a base for pre-programming? So I think that's a very important question to be a foundation before we proceed. Anyway, thank you so much, Ems, for your question. I hope that we can invite more speakers here from the AI community. And I really am very proud to bring the research of Elisabetta to the AI community and ask them maybe to build on it or collaborate with Elisabetta, because I think this is really, really important and not
Thank
so
you.
long. Yeah, really. I'm a fan of your work. And not so long ago, we had Monica, who is an AI epistemologist, who came here and she was speaking about AI alignment. But that would bring us also to beg the question on the program or whatever is the information that is already embedded on the actual precocial species. So but your question ends is very, very interesting because in science, you always ask questions, even if you can't answer them. And the questions are always important. So thank you so much for bringing that question up. So we're here for about 1 hour and 30 minutes now, but I'm sure I've got a lot to say to Elisabetta, but maybe we can invite her again to come back soon because I know that she has other studies as well. So, but there's somebody who raised his hand on the last minute. Bob, can you see the one who raised his hand?
I do not.
Mr. Gilvat, Golam Gilvani. If Elizabeth still has maybe 5 minutes to
Yeah.
answer,
Yes.
I could not bring him up, so I authorized him to come on stage. I hope he's able to go up. Bob, if you see him on stage, oh yeah, he is here.
He's
And
here.
yeah, Mr. Gilvani, uh, he, are you able to speak now? I'll give you the mic.
Can I talk now?
Go ahead, please.
I like to ask, for any object to be visible, you need mm, and a number of photon. There
Yeah.
should be a range of the photon in terms of the number to be visible any object. Or not visible. If
Yeah.
you have too many, or sometimes if you have too many photons around an object, it's not visible.
Mhm.
So, what is the range of this?
So we didn't push the chicks to the boundaries basically, but we had to make sure that when they had the tactile stimulation, that there was no visual stimulation, and so on top of measuring that with a lux meter that there were no photons inside the incubator, we basically covered the incubators with blinds, and also we had a double curtain system in the room so that we were sure that they were basically sealed in basically 4 layers so that there was no light at all to which they were exposed to in the tactile simulation. Instead, for the visual test, you can basically think about the chicks as very similar to us, to humans, because they evolved as us to have a diurnal vision. And for the colors, they are like us, but a bit better because they are tetrachromatic. So I don't know exactly how many photons there were in the visual stimulation, but they could tell apart the stimuli because they were able to solve the task, and because in similar settings they solved many perceptual tasks before. It's interesting because when we test the chicks with the famous visual illusions, like for instance the Ebbinghaus illusion, where basically there is a segment which on the sides has some arrows that go like let's say a greater and minor than sign, or the opposite. They have the same illusions that we have. And so it seems that also for other perceptual illusions, the visual system works pretty much like our. So I cannot tell you exactly how many photons they were exposed to, but they were able to discriminate.
Yes, so thank you so much, Elisabetta. I hope we can invite you again. I will get in
Thank
touch with.
you.
So there's a lot to learn here, but maybe there's a next time. So let's
Yes.
flash our mic for our great speaker, Dr. Versace.
Thank you so much. It was great to exchange ideas and to listen to questions that were very interesting and also different from what I usually get. So it was very, very interesting an exchange, and an intellectual exchange that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please know that we are all rooting for you, Elisabetta, for your work and your students' work. Yeah. So I'd like to say that we will be having another room in less than 12 hours from now. And our guest speaker is coming from Caltech. He is the recipient of a recent award. I think just yesterday he graduated from his postdoc, the Clauser Prize Award for his thesis, Learning in the Quantum Universe, which was judged to have the greatest potential to open new avenues of human thought and endeavor. And of course, this study is advised by John Preskill of Caltech. So please check out our upcoming room. We have Dr. Robert Wang who will join us. And I'd like to say that we had a very, very enjoyable session with Elisabetta. And I repeat that we keep our fingers crossed that she comes again. And I'd like
Thank
to
you.
pass the mic to Bob to if he has something to say.
I enjoyed this very, very much. I never thought about gravity affecting the brain before, so I'm going to go away with things to think about, and I appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Yes, so at this point, I'd like to give the mic to Darcel to help us close the room. Thank you, Ens, Kevin, Jacob, Alfonso, Mr. G, for asking questions. Tomoko, Sylvester, Modi, Ahmed, Andy, Del, Joella, Mento, and Patricia, and everyone who has been here before. Thank you so much for your support. And once again, thank you, Elisabetta. So, Darcel, mic to you.
Thank you, Cecile, and thank you, Doctor, for a great room. To close the room, we're going to start our countdown from lucky number 9. Is everybody ready?
Ready?
Ready.
Ready?
9!
9,
9,
Mr. G, 8.
8,
There we go. Alfonso, 7.
7,
Jacob, 6.
6, 6.
Kevin, 5.
Fiver.
Inez, 4.
Or vier.
Bob, Bob, 3.
3 it is.
Cecile, dos eques.
Dos Equis!
Good doctor, you're number 1. Call out our last number, please.
1, uno.
Thank you. Thank you, Elisabetta. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. And
Bye bye.
see you all in the next rooms of Quantum Photonics and see you again, Elisabetta, so soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Thanks.